Gospel, the two Marys go to the tomb, and the angel of the Lord greets them with these most joyous Easter words. Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He has risen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost. Amen. Please be seated. This morning, the church around the world gathers, some like us in our church home, many others at their computers, as the church has had to go electronic. Now, if you knew most of us clergy, you know that that's problematic, because we are not very adept at using that kind of medium. But Christians around the world are doing what they have to do to gather. And many of the Christians around the world will begin with the great Easter acclamation, Alleluia, Christ is risen. The Lord is risen indeed. Alleluia. So I want to try that this morning. I will say the first part, Alleluia, Christ is risen, and then you chime in, the Lord is risen indeed. Alleluia. Let's try it. Alleluia, Christ is risen.
The Lord is risen indeed. Alleluia.
You did much better than the 9:30. I made them do it over. The long 40-day journey of Lent has come to an end. And the joyous Easter season, often called the Great 50 Days, have begun. Someone very wise once said, all truth can be sung, and if it cannot be sung, it must not be true. The truth of Jesus' resurrection this morning can certainly be sung. Just a few minutes ago, as we read the gospel, we read the great hymn which is titled Victory. And I'm not sure there is a better summary of Easter and the Passion and the Gospel than the verses of that hymn. Let me read them, because sometimes when we sing verses, it's hard to really feel the significance. But listen to the words. The strife is over. The battle done. The victory of life is won. The song of triumph has begun. Alleluia. The powers of death have done their worst, but Christ their legions hath dispersed. Let shout of holy joy outburst. Alleluia. The 3 sad days are quickly sped. He rises glorious from the dead. All glory be to our risen head. Alleluia. He closed the yawning gates of hell. The bars from heaven's high portals fell. Let hymns of praise his triumph tell. Hallelujah. And when we first began this service, we sang a processional hymn for Easter that I suspect all of you have sung every year for as long as you can remember. Jesus Christ is risen today. If that doesn't send chills through your veins, well, I'm sure it did. So, given this great victory of life over death, Easter raises the important question. It's one thing to come together in joy and celebrate, but God has a purpose for this. And it raises the question, how can we respond to such a loving gift of grace, of mercy, and love? For if Jesus' resurrection doesn't change the way you and I live, then we've missed the point. St. Paul this morning gave us the best understanding, in my opinion, in the Epistle, when he said this to the church in Colossae. If you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things that are above, not on things that are on earth. For you have died, and your life is hid with Christ in God. When Christ, who is our life, appears, then you will appear with him in glory. Such beautifully written, wonderful advice to us. The key to the Christian life is where we place our minds. Some of us at St. Bede's are reading a book, a remarkable book, called Life Without Lack by Dallas Willard. And the thesis of Willard's book is that if we want, it is possible to enjoy a life completely content, whatever our circumstances are. If only, Willard says, if we do what St. Paul told us to do this morning, namely, keep our minds each day focused on the things that are above. Right now, that's a little bit hard to do, what with the virus and all of the problematic things it causes us every day. But even in the midst of something this awful, St. Paul and Dallas Willard give us incredibly rich advice. The key to our blessedness, the key to our contentment, our happiness, our ability to let go of the everyday minutia fears, anxieties, all that stuff that bombards us, is to be sure we're keeping our minds focused on Him. And so this, of course, calls us to prayer, to study, to reading God's holy word, and just striving daily to center our lives on Him. In the gospel reading this morning from St. John, it concludes with the risen Lord seeking out the apostles. They had hid away in the room, locked behind the doors, out of fear for their lives. They didn't know. It was only 3 days earlier they crucified Jesus, and of course Peter denied Him 3 times. But they were afraid, and I can certainly understand that. But the kind of God we believe in is a God who would break down the barriers of the house, come in, and say to them, "Peace be with you." Now, if I had been Jesus, I would have come in and probably read the riot act to them. You guys betrayed me. You denied me. We traveled together for 3 years, and you ran like cowards. Not our Lord. It's not the way God is, for which I am very grateful, and I'm sure you are too. He comes in and offers them God's peace. And then He shows them the scars on His wrists, in His side. And then they recognize who it is, their risen Lord. What it says about God is that He is always seeking us. And the Bible tells the history of this desire we have to hide. Adam and Eve, first stories of the Bible. You know, they eat from the tree that they were told not to, and all of a sudden, everything changes, and they think they can hide, and God won't know how to find us, we'll just hide from Him. Well, no. God found them, and He found the apostles. And we are reminded that as we go through our lives, we too will pick up scars, wounds, failures, disappointments, broken relationships that we have run from and hid from. And those scars, even when we have God's peace, are still a part of our identity, who we are. I've got several, and I suspect we all do. But in the midst of our brokenness, the risen Christ says, "Jim, here's my peace." And St. Paul tells us, keep your mind focused on the things from above. And if we do, we will have protection from the big three adversaries: the world, the flesh, and the devil. So today our Easter joy is that in the midst of our brokenness, the risen Christ comes right through the doors we hide behind and offers us his peace, a peace which the world cannot give. And for that, on this day of celebration, we need to be humbled by his goodness, excited by his victory, and we need to commit our lives to keeping them focused on the things that are from above, where Christ is. And I'd like to close by once again saying the great words of the Easter acclamation. Alleluia, Christ is risen.
The Lord is risen indeed. Hallelujah.
In the name of the Father,